Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? This is Enrique of Sanchez of Spanish United. Today we have a very special guest. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yes. Hi, I'm Arline Geronimus. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan, and I've written the book that was just released, Weathering the Extraordinary Stress of Ordinary Life in an Unjust Society.
Welcome. Thank you for being on the show, Professor.
You're very welcome.
Yes, as we were corresponding through via email, I came across you because when I was driving home a couple days ago in Burbank, because I live in Burbank, California, I was actually listening to your interview on NPR News, and it caught my attention because not too many social scientists discuss the issue of health, particularly in the Hispanic community, and that really was something very commendable because after African Americans, Hispanics have the second highest health problems in the country in relation to diabetes, to obesity, to poor nutrition, and the thing that really caught my attention is that you mentioned something that I didn't really think about, is that even Hispanics are able to move up the social mobility ladder, economic ladder, and they're able to move out of their neighborhoods and go to suburbs or areas that are more predominantly Caucasian American. They still have that stress of how they're going to be perceived by others, and that itself can cause health problems as well. So I wanted to ask you, and also for the audience in Spanish United, what led you to that conclusion, and how did you come up with that observation from that part of your book, Weathering?
Well, let me just first say a little about what weathering is, because then it will be clearer how it applies to the Hispanic population. Weathering is the kind of corrosion of your health and all your body systems and organs that occurs when you are when your social identity is denigrated and thought of as lesser or deficient or worse in a society. And what that means that in many places, it's hard to know whether you're welcome, whether you're safe, whether you can be authentic, whether you will be treated fairly. And that actually activates, it's not a matter of being a snowflake. I wouldn't even call it a microaggression, because I think that diminishes this process. But having to be vigilant and alert to, do you need to do code switching? Do you need to act in certain white ways? Do you need to try to counter stereotypes? Do you need to actually get away because it's a truly unsafe place that you're in, only because of your ethnic background? That activates an actual physiological process in the body where you become obviously vigilant to threats, where your body mobilizes to be ready to fight or flee a threat. And what that does is it sends stress hormones through your body, and those stress hormones get your blood pumping faster, but divert that fast pumping blood to your heart and other muscles and organs that will help you if you need to fight or flee. Meanwhile, it will send less oxygenated blood to other organs, or if you're a pregnant woman, to your fetus, that aren't going to help you in the fight or flee that you might be about to have to do. And so when that happens chronically to people, the systems that get hyperactivated start to be worn down from the hyperactivation. Other body systems or organs start to be damaged from not getting the nutrients, or if it's a fetus, may become growth retarded and low birth weight, and possibly even die. The other thing the stress hormones do is they catapult sugars and fats from the storage sites in your body into your bloodstream. So you have circulating sugars and fats to give energy for this process. And it's a wonderful process if you're being attacked by a lion.
Mhm.
And it's meant to be very short, because after, it's a few minutes either gets you out of the danger or you may not survive the danger, but either way, it's a very short period of time. And then if you survive the danger, your body functions all go back to normal and you start getting blood throughout your body evenly.
Mhm.
And so given that this very same process that we think of in terms of when we're facing a life-threatening emergency where we really need to mobilize strength and energy, but if you're in a denigrated group, your body is mobilizing almost all the time on a chronic basis, maybe not actually fighting or fleeing, but you're being vigilant for whether you're going to need to, and your
Mhm.
body's getting prepared. And so over time, all that fat and sugar in your blood doesn't go away, and that's probably related to obesity and diabetes that's higher in the Hispanic population. You're also sending, alerting your immune cells and sending white blood cells throughout your body, so that if you were with the lion attacked, it would actually help you recover from the damage that is done to you. But again, that just keeps happening. That's how we get inflammation throughout our bodies, which is very related to the various diseases that Hispanic Americans get at high rates and at early ages. Also, the blood, the sugar, the fat, the sugar, and the white blood cells are a recipe for getting plaque in your arteries. So it will help you, I won't say help you, it will propel you towards earlier ages of heart attacks, heart disease, enlarged hearts. And so when you think of the whole litany of diseases that are in effect stress related, we can't ignore, even though we have been content to ignore, but if we really want to promote health equity, we can't ignore the source of this kind of chronic physiological stress arousal.
Mhm. I can definitely relate to that because 12, 13 years ago, I moved to Michigan, which is kind of interesting. I did my first 2 semesters in Fair State University, and we had bought a house in a little town close to that area. And, my mother, she's retired and whatever. And the first time I've actually experienced that type of stress, like what you mentioned in your book, is when I lived in Michigan, because I am Hispanic American, and I really stood out. And even though I was in a place that was mostly rural and country, and even though I was going to the college, I really felt out of place because practically everybody there was Caucasian. And Michigan is one of the most segregated states in the country, in my personal opinion. And I always felt, yeah, I always felt that I always felt that I had to be on guard. And
exactly.
When my mother and I lost her home back in 2008, it caused a lot of extreme stress because that was my mother's retirement home, and that was going to be my future inheritance. And then we moved back to California, and even though we're living in a better place in terms of, it's a nice place, but we're living rented, and that's also stress on ourselves because we kind of downgraded, and that was all caused because of the prejudice and discrimination that we experienced over there, and that caused a lot of long-term health problems, primarily to my mother and also to myself. Even though I'm a person that keeps healthy, exercises,
right,
tries to minimize stress, so I can definitely relate that stress can cause a lot of problems. Like for example, here in the state of California, there is a city that's called Santa Ana, which is in Orange County. It's predominantly Hispanic, but what's unique about that city is that out of the entire state and possibly the entire country, it has the highest obesity of children throughout the whole area, and the majority is Hispanic, but a lot of it has to do because of, stress, in addition to not eating healthy and not exercising. So this is a concern that Spanish United has. We're not only just about human rights and civil rights for Hispanic people. We're also for the health rights of our people, because I feel that a lot of Hispanics don't get the adequate help that they need in
Mhm.
terms of mental health, physical health, and then that in turn causes a lot of our people to die prematurely.
Yes, and the reason I wanted to write the book about weathering and get this concept out into the broader world is because I think a lot of people think you can eat right and exercise and do all the quote right things, and that will keep you healthy. And I'm not saying it's bad to do those things,
Yeah.
but um, but at the same time, that if you're in a denigrated, marginalized group, or if you're an impoverished population, if you're living under conditions of environmental racism, other kinds of degradation and assaults, if you're sleep deprived because you're working nights or having to work several jobs to make ends meet at all, uh, all of those things combined with the literal part of being a denigrated group, which is about everybody understand the dominant population having all these negative stereotypes in it and low expectations of you, and knowing they have them.
Mhm.
So you're having to do, even if you're in an upper class situation, you're still mobilizing these physiological processes, because you're having to work with managing your social identity around the white people who are there, who you have every reason to believe think you're not going to succeed at the college, or you're not going to succeed in your job, or you're just there because of affirmative action, or
Right.
so you can't even buy your way out or educate your way out. Again, I'm not saying people shouldn't try to get educations
Of
and
course.
or earn enough money to feel secure, but um, uh, but it comes for one of the real costs of having kind of a structurally racist or xenophobic society is that you're still going to have your body pay a huge toll for just the privilege of being around white people or in a
Right.
system that works according to their rules and institutions that were made for them, that you were describing feeling like a fish out of water, and navigating schools, elite schools like Michigan or others, or itself takes a toll, because those institutions were designed with a different demographic in mind,
Mhm.
to do not understand or necessarily respect the things that give your life purpose and meaning, or the hardships you face, or the trade-offs and choices you have to make that may be in conflict with how the institution runs.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely believe that when you have institutions that are created for a certain demographic of people, and then when you have people of another demographic that want to better themselves and educate themselves, it can create not only a culture clash, but it could just create a clash period, because it's like I had many classmates that when I was in Michigan, that they kind of felt that I was out of place, because it's like many people in Michigan, primarily like in the rural areas and small towns, many of them have not even moved out of the area. A lot of them
Mhm.
have never even met a Hispanic person in their life. Like
Right.
when me and my mother moved to this town called Mecosta, which is a village outside of Big Rapids,
Hmm.
a lot of people did not know what Hispanic was. Like they assume every Hispanic is Mexican. You know, we're not Mexican, we're Puerto Ricans. And most
Mhm.
people think that Puerto Rico is part of Mexico. And most people don't know that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Ignorance,
there's a lot of
unconscionable.
unconscious ignorance, and at the same time, I have to be constantly be on my guard, educating people, telling them, no, no, this is what we are. This is what, because it's like they assume that anyone that is from California is a
Mhm.
gang member or a liberal, which
Right,
which is
right.
the complete opposite. But I think the media and the state institutions in Michigan in particular has a lot to do with it. That's what I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
And that helps us, it doesn't just sustain ignorance in the majority population, it actually promotes, this denigration or these stereotypes, or um, it's not neutral.
right. So I wanted to ask Professor, how long have you been in the field that you've been in? Like, how long have you been doing it for?
I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this about 35 years.
Nice. Are you originally from Michigan?
No, I'm originally from Massachusetts.
Oh, nice, nice. So, what made you decide to get into public education? I mean, not education, I mean public health. I mean,
Um, I've always, I grew up at a time where civil rights, where Jim Crow was still in the early parts of my life in effect, where I was very well aware of, I was participating even as a child in the Great Boycott with Cesar Chavez. And so I've always been sensitized to inequities, and I always felt compelled to do something to change them. And I wouldn't have necessarily predicted it would be through public health, but as I started seeing with my own eyes while I was in college, and I worked at a clinic in a high poverty area. When I started seeing how much worse the health was of people there, compared to, say, my classmates, and of the same age, it really drew. It seems like health is a basic human right, and that you can only go so far with anything else. If you're healthy, or if you can expect to live, you can only postpone doing things that matter if you expect to live for a long time. And that there are just a lot of things that people that white people and other middle and upper class people just took for granted, that I saw in the population that I was working with at the clinic, who were predominantly Black or brown, that they couldn't take for granted, and it was showing through their health. And I wanted to understand that, and I wanted to understand that beyond just don't smoke or don't eat the wrong foods, especially because I was working mostly with teenagers, and none of whom smoked. In fact, I now know from research I did early on that smoking in marginalized populations starts later. Here's an example.
mm,
There's more smoking in marginalized populations among adults and less among teens than among whites. But most of our health education programs to help people avoid or stop smoking are based on assuming it's the teens who are the ones who need to be reached. So they have school-based programs. They have programs that speak to, being cool, or things that teenagers are more likely to be smoking because of. They don't understand that it's actually people who are, working ages in who pick up smoking, in their mid to late 20s, when a lot of the white teenagers have quit and then smoke the rest of their lives, because it first of all, it helps with stress, and second of
mm,
all, because there's targeted marketing to populations like yours, to promote cigarette smoking.
You would
So,
think,
yeah,
with all of the promotion of smoking is bad, especially for my generation, that you would think that people of my age group wouldn't be prone to smoke.
right, but they are, and disproportionately. And I think that's because they're dealing with stressors, and because they're targeted um, by the cigarette marketers. So, and maybe you can't take a Caribbean vacation, but you can have a cigarette.
Right. And
And
yeah,
obviously they're addictive. So once you've started, and if the programs to help people quit smoking are mostly aimed at teenagers whose main concern in life is, do they look cool? Does that girl like them?
right,
How can they piss off their parents?
right.
Whatever the motivation is, those programs are going to help you even if you're able to access them. They're not speaking to your needs. You've been erased.
Right, right. And I think that's a concern, because I feel that a lot of adults, primarily in the Hispanic community, have a struggle primarily with stress. And a concern that I have is that in every Hispanic majority city or plurality, I see a lot of smoke shops, liquor stores, adult bookstores, pornography places, etc. And I look at places that are predominantly Asian. You don't see that. So I wonder if they're doing it primarily to control the population, to keep them enslaved and dependent on the system, or they're doing it just to take the transfer of wealth from one group of people to another. Because it's like a lot of Hispanics complain, why we're broke, but yet at the same time, I don't really see them saving, and yet they're dying prematurely. Like outside of homicide, the preventable diseases is the second cause of death among Hispanic Americans.
Right. And the word preventable is a little misleading, because that, to the extent that they are preventable, but it's not enough to take kind of individual personal responsibility. And we're led to believe that if you just do that, if you just, have willpower, you won't get fat. If you just, play by the rules, you'll get yourself out of a cigarette habit, or you won't have started one.
Mhm.
And people don't include that that, again, I'm not saying people should smoke, or that they should not try to eat healthier if they can, but that alone is not going to help. And it's a stressor then, because people in those situations wonder why they can't, who want to quit and can't quit, what's wrong with them? Or people may not be aware of all the ways that, either through marketing of and placement of liquor stores and stores that sell cigarettes, and even loose cigarettes, so that it doesn't cost a lot at any given smoke, that's something beyond what an individual can change. That's a social problem. And that if you add to it that even the stereotyping triggers this reaction in your body, that's an automatic reaction. We were evolved to have that reaction. So you can't just tell yourself not to have it, because you don't even know you're having it. When your heart gets elevated chronically, it stays elevated while you're sleeping. You can't kind of just stop your sleeping to meditate. It's a lot of this is beyond an individual's control. And so there will never be that health equity of the Hispanic American population with the white American population, or with what any human being should be able to accomplish in their health, until we start recognizing these other sources of obesity and diabetes and shortened lives, and heart disease.
So what can we do to not only upset offset it, but what can we do at the same time to try to be aware of these issues, to try to at least manage it? Because I know that there's a lot of things we cannot prevent as beyond our control, but what suggestions would you give to people that are in situations, that they know that they're being put under a microscope? Like how can they manage their stress?
Um, I think, well, I don't have the perfect answer. Part of why I wanted to write the book is so that we can start a more public discussion of, so what can you do if it's not just a matter of going to yoga class or, stopping for a minute to reframe the situation or meditate. If that alone, those things alone, which may not even be possible for certain people, aren't going to do it, what can we do? And I don't have the answer, but what I have seen since my book came out is that I've gotten a lot of emails from people in marginalized populations who have told me that just learning about weathering really made them less stressed. I mean, they were still very stressed by all the things by all the stressors that are, endemic in our country. But they said they had different people put it differently, but in effect, they were all sort of released from any guilt they had felt about that they weren't being good enough because they couldn't get a handle on their weight or their blood sugar or, their heart disease, that there's this extra stressor, which is the belief that it's under individual control, and the equating of not being able to control it with somehow being a weaker person or a less moral person or just not as good as those of us who can control ourselves, when in fact we're not controlling ourselves either. We just have many fewer stressors in our lives and we have many more resources to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I really think your book, even though I haven't read it, but I really think it's something that touches base on a lot of issues, and at the same time I feel that it will give the Caucasian community at least a better understanding about how Hispanics have to deal with being, for example, put under a microscope or having to try to win the approval of them as well.
Right. And there are, while there are a lot of white people who maybe don't care or are happy to have negative stereotypic beliefs, there are also a lot of white people who want to do something that would be helpful, who don't feel good about these inequities, but they don't have a clue what to do, or their ideas are just too limited because they don't understand the lived experience of being Hispanic in a country that, looks down on. And it's, during Trump, when he's talking about you're all criminals and deplorables and,
Right.
That exacerbates any lack of feeling of safety in this country, or like you can be authentic, or you can live the life the way it is meaningful to you, or that you came from a shithole country. Pardon the French, but that was his words.
Yes, correct.
So I think it's a very important part of the mix to understand that people, it's not just that someone's a snowflake if they don't like being called some racial epithet, or it's that their body is physiologically affected in ways that none of us should want to be happening to anyone.
No, of course not. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we educate people on Hispanic United, is that we can't control people's actions, but we can control how we are as people. And we try to help Hispanic people empower themselves by bettering themselves, trying to improve the image of the Hispanic population. Like, for example, I do encourage Hispanics to be more generous, be more giving, because Hispanics tend to have the stereotype that we take and we don't give. And one of the things
Mhm.
that I encourage is is for Hispanic people to be proactive, the community work, to volunteer. You don't necessarily have to
Mhm.
give money to give back. You could give back in other ways by giving your
Right.
time, donating, looking out for those that really don't have anybody. And I think that
Mhm.
that could prevent stereotypes, but at the same time, it could also bring reforms to the Hispanic community as well, which we desperately need.
Mhm. I agree.
And I wanted to tell you, Professor, we came to the end of our time. I want to tell you, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a truly honor to have you here. And for your listeners in the University of Michigan, if anyone wants to get a hold of us, we are on all social media platforms. We are on Spanish United YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And those that want to donate anything to Spanish United is tax deductible. Feel free to contact me. And again, thank you so much for being on the show. As soon as I'm finished, I will email you the link and you could share it to whatever platform you want over at the University of Michigan.
Okay, I'd be pleased to, and I'm very glad you invited me to have this.
Likewise. And I look forward to reading your book soon.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.